And the point of transformation, as I said, is becoming whole. If you look at, in terms of becoming whole, if you look at that whole ego development process, a baby in the womb doesn't have an ego. There's no ego there. Right? And babies in general has very little ego until it starts having all those beautiful experiences of being ripped out of mother's womb, being cut off, being scrubbed with like white cold towels and waking up in this reality, and then having situations where suddenly mommy's titty is not in the mouth and so it says, oh wait a second, this is separate from me. Wait, is this separate from me? You know, and the first experience when you bounce your head against the table, you say, oh that hurt. Wait, I wouldn't hurt myself, so this must be separate from me. Right? So slowly but surely, through those experiences of pain, lack, shame, guilt, you grow your ego further and further. Right? And at the age around, typically around 5, 6, 7, 8, you start looking at rules. Right? Because suddenly you don't just get love anymore. It's not just good enough that you just hear. Now you have to go to school and bring grades home, and they tell you whether or not you get a good child, and if you don't bring a good grade home, they say you're a bad child, and you get into this whole rule-based thing, right? And at some point you get fed up with it and you say, screw my parents, you know, I need to get away from them. You know, there's other groups that are much cooler. I'm going to hang out with these kids over here because they don't do homework either, or I'm going to hang out with these kids over here because they play chess and they're really cool, they're really smart, and I like those kids, or I'm going to hang out with the yearbook crowd, or whatever it might be, that you now determine is part of who you are, right? Your ego is kind of developing itself and distancing itself and saying, I'm this, I'm not that. Right? Until you get to that point where at some point you sit alone in your very first apartment and you're like, I'm alone, you know, and you're really alone. And that's what typically the 20s are about, 20s to 30s, is to realize who you are alone. Right? And oftentimes during that time we start trying to, we have this like completely alone ego now, so we try and reconnect. Right? We build partnerships, we build families, and then once we have those kind of taken care of, people start volunteering again, or going to church group, or looking at the larger community again, and at some point, done. You know, ego's all gone again. Not there anymore. Direction, dude. That direction, yeah. Another way of looking at that ego development is that if you think about initially everything was just one happy oneness, right? And then there was this initial little black dot that your ego, the first separation thought. And it grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. So now you have this like gigantic big ego, right? And people typically say big egos are bad, right? But if you think about Gandhi or Jesus and those folk, they had pretty big egos too. So it can't must all be bad. So maybe the ego itself isn't bad, because as we just learned in the prior piece in quantum physics, I actually need to have that ego, I need to have that separation. Because I didn't separate myself, if I didn't say I'm Philip and I'm not all of you people, I wouldn't have this experience of being here, right? So I have to have that separation, and I have to have that ego. Now if you're lucky, what happens is that your ego at some point, in the middle of it, this little tiny white dot starts again, right? And that's when you pass the turning point, and ultimately what you do is, you dissolve your ego in that, you surrender it. You still have your ego, there's still that line around it, because you still have to hold that separation. You still have to say, yes, I'm here and I'm not everything, right? Because if you cut that little silver cord, you go off in your astral body and you're gone, you're not in your physical body anymore. You don't want to do that, you want to be here, right? Because it's kind of fun to be here, once you get the hang of it. Right? So you want to be here, but you want to be here only so that there's this very basic little tiny outline that you're holding on to. But overall, your ego is all in service. Your ego is all surrendered. Another model of becoming whole. And I realized afterwards I should have switched the colors, but if you start with the unconscious self, right? Through our initial experiences, we start having those connections to the outside. We start building those persona. Right? We talk to mommy in a certain way, we talk to daddy in a certain way, and we talk to our friend in a certain way, and then we start talking to a school teacher, and so on and so on. And so we develop all these persona, right? And we talk to one person differently than we do to the other. And one of the biggest causes of modern day neurosis, as R.D. Laing pointed out in The Divided Self, is people trying to uphold all these different personae, right? I'm this person over here with my job, and I'm having fun with my colleagues. I'm this person when I'm home with my wife. I'm this person with myself. I'm this person with my brother, etc., etc. And they don't reconcile, right? So the first thing that we have to do in terms of becoming whole is integrate our conscious self, right? So that's the first start. It's like to be always you. That doesn't mean now that you have to treat everybody the same way. That means you have different strategies for different people, but it's always you shining through that. It's always your integrity. And the thing is, once you develop it, you start getting to those archetypes, and those archetypes are essentially the equivalent to persona, but they go towards the inside. Like that little voice that you hear in your head, for example, that says, oh, I can't do this is so overwhelming, I don't know what to do. That's your child archetype kicking in. Actually, Carol Mays has a beautiful book called Sacred Contracts, in which she talks about these different archetypes, and she says each one of us has 12. 4 of them we have in common, 8 of them are personal ones. And the one that we have in common, according to her, are child, victim, saboteur, and archetype. The child is the one that says, this is overwhelming, I don't know what to do. The victim one says, oh, why me? This person did that to me, poor me, why always me, right? The saboteur is that little voice in your head that says, you think you can do this? You've never done this before. You can never do this right. Come on, think about how you fucked up there. You can't do this, right? And then the prostitute is the one that says, oh, but I have safety here. This is what I know. Over there, that's kind of cool and it's sparkly and I'd like to go there really badly, but here I know what I have. Right? We do it in relationships or jobs a lot. Right? We just stick with what we have rather than going out there because that's safe and we'd rather prostitute ourselves literally than to go out and be joyous. And then she talks about these other ones, and the numbers here aren't right, I couldn't squeeze them all on there. She talks about these 8 other ones that we have, which would be things like the artist archetype, or the hero archetype, or the rescuer archetype, or the guide archetype. If you think about movies that you've seen or books that you've read, and the characters you identify with, that's sort of your archetypes that you relate to. And the goal is to make them your friends. So when that child archetype comes up and says, oh, I'm overwhelmed, instead of just letting that happen and accepting that that is you thinking now, say, oh, my child wants to say something. Take a piece of paper and write a dialogue. Say, what's up, child? Why are you overwhelmed? It will give you the answers. Because it's coming up for a reason. It's trying to help you. It's trying to help you make something unconscious conscious, some dynamic. And so ultimately they all help you make the whole thing conscious. Ultimately you become whole and you integrate your whole unconscious self and become your whole self. And part of that is also this concept of Dharma. Because if you're not seen, and I started this chapter off of seeing clearly and wiping your shield so you can see, right? And I talked about karma, and karma and Dharma are often kind of confused. Karma are your propensities, right, for certain emotions and thoughts. And when you say you have to do karma work, right, as a meaning of life, it means changing those propensities so you get to a point where you actually enjoy being here. Now Dharma is a different concept. Dharma means the natural order of things. Right? How everything works perfectly well, then that's Dharma. Right? If the birds fly in the sky and the fish are in the ocean, rather than the birds suddenly dumping into the ocean, the fishes start flying, that would be a violation of Dharma. And if you look at our nature, there's a lot of violation of Dharma going on. There's a whole personal Dharma, right? And if I know that I'm doing what I'm here supposed to be doing, there's five things that I know by. It's easy, it comes natural to me. This is the first one. First one, very important, benefits others. Right? The very first thing, if I do my Dharma, if I'm integrating with nature and with who I'm really at, who I am, I have some value to give to this world. Everybody has some value to give to this world. Everybody has some talent that they're particularly good at, that they're here to do that. And that always benefits others. Right? So you're here to benefit others. Do whatever comes easy and natural to you. Do what feels joyous. Something that actually you would want to do it all day long, at night, blah, blah, blah. You love doing it so much. Fourth thing is that it sustains you, not just financially, but also physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, on all of those levels. Yeah? And finally, you feel sort of guided in the process. As synchronicities happen and weird things, and that's, if you read Pauli's and Jung's work on synchronicity, it's all about us realizing those quantum propensities and pulling and changing archetypal patterns. Yeah? And that will come up that way.